Okay, I'm recording. Let's look at announcements. So we have a test on Tuesday and Thursday of next week. Labs 1 through 7. Labs 1 through 7. So one of the tests you'll have to make an interface. You'll have to, I won't give you an activity main. You'll have to sort of create it from scratch, and then the other one, I'll probably give you it. And we have, what do we have? We have spinners, we have radio groups and radio buttons. Check boxes came later, but we have text views and edit texts and radio groups. So we're expecting those things.
I'm not able to tell you.
So those are so that's the topic, and I gave you a homework. It's not strictly speaking due before the test, but is basically a practice test. So look through that. So that is Tuesday and Thursday. I'm expecting everybody to be in person, and I do know that some people come from another class. So those people, I don't need to rush here like crazy people. I will start you from when you start. I'm expecting that's not more than 20 minutes or something like that, but okay. All right, so that is a reminder about the test. So today we're in a lab, starting lab 12, but I will ask if there are any questions. Is there anything about how the format of the test or things you're stuck on that you want to sort of ask me up here for the recording? Any questions in person, online? Okay, yes, no? Okay, so then I will move on to the new stuff. So there's only 2 of them are just pictures, and then there's one new app to go through over, and then what you have to do. And what you have to do is pretty much what I did, just sort of change the data and so on. Okay, so it's another one of these access the internet things. So we're going to use a library called Volley, and last time we were accessing images, JPEGs and PNGs and so on. And so we used 3 different libraries: Picasso, Glide, and Coil. This time I'm only going to show you Volley, but this time we're going to access a text file and specifically a JSON file. And Volley is going to help us do that. And Volley's not a standard thing. So just like in the previous 3 things, the Picasso, the Glide, and the Coil, it's not something that we can just import. First, we have to edit the Gradle, resync, and then we can import things. So we're going to the Gradle, build.gradle, the module, not the project version, and we add this line, and then I'm also going to use Picasso. Now I think I could use Volley for my image, but Picasso is a little easier to use than Volley. So I'm going to stick with one of the other and Glide is as easy as Picasso, and Coil is probably even easier. So but Volley is a little more involved, but I think Volley could do the image as well, but it's a little more to it. So I'll stick to the simple things for the images. So that's why I'm implementing two things. So edit the Gradle. I also have these lines as comments in the KT file, so we can copy and paste them, but I just wanted to show you in a big picture to remind you that that's happening. And the other thing we're doing is we're going out to the internet. We're reading JSON off of the internet. And so we want to do our internet permission stuff. So the app is going to read a JSON file and parse it and do all these sort of things with that data. And so we need permission. The app needs permission to go to the internet. So that's an edit to the Android manifest. And I'm getting, the files are going to be on my website, and my website is not encrypted. So Sal decided to keep me in HTTP when they moved the rest of everything else on their site to HTTPS. And so then we need this attribute to the application tag that says we're going to allow, when we're accessing the internet, we are allowed to access the sort of unencrypted files. And so that's this clear text thing. So those are, and you see I have a working hello world, which I'm going to now turn into a Harry Potter Volley JSON app. Okay. So I zipped up the main, and that's just me being lazy, frankly. I should go in and find the files that I explicitly edited. So I should find the build.gradle, which I don't have because main is too far down. But it does have the manifest, and it does have the activity underscore main, and it does have the main activity. So it has 3 of the 4. I tell you in a comment in the KT what has to be edited in the Gradle. But I had somebody this morning just sort of dragging this main into a project main and causing all sorts of problems. So that doesn't seem to work, so don't do it. We'll do what we've always been doing, is pasting the files in. So I zipped up more than just the files because I'm being lazy, and this is a convenient thing that has most of the files I want. It would have drawable if I wanted drawable. It would have raw if I wanted raw. It has all those things, so it's a convenient thing to grab, but you don't just sort of drop it into your project and expect it to work, which is what the guy was doing. He never watched me do that, but that's what he decided to do. It didn't work, so don't do it. Or if you can find, the way to make it work, then fine. Okay, so let's edit the manifest. And so we want permission to use the internet. And that is, here's the manifest up here. And I want above the application, I'm pasting in the permission to use the internet. And then down here in the application, I'm adding an attribute to uses clear text traffic. And that is, I'm going to put here, I guess. Okay. So this allows me to go to the internet and get things. And this down here, line 13 now, allows me to go to HTTP. It's not going to restrict me to HTTPS. It's going to allow me to go to HTTP as well. And my stuff's on HTTP. Okay, so that's what we need to do to the manifest. Okay. And close, okay. And then what? Let me go into the layout and do the activity main. Control A, Control C, I'm gonna copy That's here in the resources, in layout, activity main. I go over to code. I'm highlighting it and pasting it in. So there is my layout pasted in. And now I'm going to go to the main activity. I still have to go to the Gradle, but my cheat for what I have to do to the Gradle is in my main activity. So go to main activity, dealt with that. I'm going over now to main, Java, com, example, Harry Potter. There we go. Copy everything but the package. I screwed myself up earlier in the week by copying the package and getting all sorts of confused. Don't copy the package. I don't name these things consistently, and so they have different package names. So that is in the main activity, paste everything but the package. Okay. When it says, I don't know what you mean by R anymore, maybe you screwed up the package. Like R, what do I mean by R? I mean this R. Like if this R comes out red, it says, I don't know what you mean by red, by R, I don't know what you mean by main activity. Maybe you screwed up the package. Okay. Now it's not happy with main activity because I'm referring to things that can't be imported yet because I need to fix the Gradle. But I have up here a note to myself, oh, here's what I need to edit the Gradle. Here was the manifest, but we did that. But here's the Gradle stuff. 2 lines, one for Volley, one for Picasso. Copy and build Gradle, the second one, the module one. Find the implementation ones. And I'm going to paste them here. They're different, I copied them from different places. So the 2 places I copied from had slightly different notations, but both notations work. The one's using parentheses, one's not. Okay. So when you change, pardon, when you edit the Gradle, you must sync. So sync now. And then hopefully if I go over to KT now, my red will disappear. And my red is disappearing. So it now understands. Okay. Let's run this and stop hello world and then run this new thing. And that's what it looks like, but that's from this morning. And now here it is. So I have a drop-down list of Harry Potter movies. Order of the Phoenix tells you information about the Order of the Phoenix, gives you a poster from the Order of the Phoenix. Here's the Half-Blood Prince. And then just as we did with the horse racing and the kids song, if you did the kids song lab, you can go to the trailer. Okay, that's a new intent. Okay. So a lot of the code you've seen before in the horse race, except in the horse race, the JSON was in raw. It was, I'll say, local. And now the JSON is going to be on the internet. And before the images were local, they were in drawable, and now they're going to be on the internet. So we're getting things, data files and images from the internet and using them. This is making us ready to use what's known as an API. Lots of people give you access to their data, but they give it to you. They don't give you access to directly to their database or anything like that. They give you an API, and then you can write code to their API. And what they usually give you is their information. You write some URL. There may be some specifics in your URL of what particular thing you want from them. And then they give you, typically, if you're asking for data, a JSON file. And then if there were if there are relevant images, then they will give you the images as a URL in the data file. So then you'll read their data file, parse their data file, get the image link, and then link to that. All kind of, all the fancy stuff. YouTube has an API, and Facebook has an API, and ESPN probably has an API. So I'm modeling an API here. Sometimes an API limits how many times you can access it. So I often just have you look at JSON files that I put up on my website and related images I put up on my website, because I won't limit the number of times you access it. This is complicated also by the fact that when you, if you do anything that's outside of LaSalle, the LaSalle network masks the individual IPs and makes everything seem like it comes from one generic LaSalle IP. This is nice for security. All they see is LaSalle and they don't see in particular you. But the problem there for us is, as coders, that makes it look like all of us are going to the same API. And so it makes it all the more likely that they're going to shut us off and think that we are sort of, purposely sort of trying to jam them up. So maybe there's a project in this course, and if you're interested in APIs, and you should be, then maybe you'll use an API in your project. And there's some APIs that I know sort of don't block people. So I may give you some project with an API or two. But if you just go around and finding the APIs you want to find, I got caught in the spring. I gave a test and I chose an API that was limited, and then the students couldn't finish the test, which was a problem. Okay, enough blah, blah, blah. All right, so let's start looking at this code. We've seen it run, we fixed the manifest, we fixed the activity main, we fixed the build Gradle. Let's start looking at the activity main. There was sort of nothing to it. A spinner, some text views, an image view, a button. So you could have guessed that from what you saw. Main activity. Let's start looking at main activity. I have a bunch of imports. Imports are imports, you know it. So now response, Volley, the Volley and the Picasso was understood. When I first came over here, it didn't know what I meant by Volley and Picasso. They needed to be in the Gradle. So we have imports. I have a comment here about what this app does. I have a comment that's talking about what Volley does for us. So that reminds me to give this little spiel. We are accessing the internet. So when you're accessing the internet, this is an example of a client-server interaction. So a client, so the phone, your computer or the phone is acting as a client, and it will make a request. And then there is a web server, in this case, LaSalle's web server, and it will respond to the request. And we are specifically, in this case, requesting some JSON. So it's going to respond with a JSON file. And that is what Volley is going to do. Volley is going to manage for us this client server HTTP request, and Volley's sophisticated enough, then it knows like JSON. So if we say we're expecting JSON, Volley's smart enough to say that is or that isn't JSON. Okay. And then here's the comment that says edit the Gradle and edit the manifest. We did that. Okay. Main activity. We have a connect to the interface, our usual stuff. Here's the spinner, the text view for the director, the writer, the producer, the music. Here's the image view to show the poster for the movie. Here's the button that takes us over to the trailer on YouTube. Okay, so easy enough. Here in 59 and 60 are the URLs. We need to know where we're going on the internet. The 59 is a full URL specifically for the JSON file. The 60 is what I'm calling a base URL, and we're going to grab images. And so this is, it's going to be this plus some image file name for us to get the image. But there are a bunch of images for, what are there, 8 movies. So there'll be 8 images. And I'm going to sort of do that dynamically. We're going to say which movie we want. We're going to have a property in our JSON that will be the image file, and then we'll add it onto all of this, and then we'll get the image. Okay. Not too far. So that's all this. All this was connect to the interface. This was establish our URLs. Here is me pointing out that these URLs are HTTP, they're not encrypted, and so we need the uses clear text traffic equals true property in the application tag in our Android manifest. Okay. I'm going to get, let's look at the JSON. You should always know what to expect from the JSON, so we should look at the JSON, copy the URL, paste it in there. And here is what the JSON looks like. It starts off with a curly bracket, which means we're starting off with an object. That object has a property called films. Films is after the colon is a square bracket, which means the value for films is an array. And then the things that the first element of the array, I have another curly bracket. So the element of the array is an object. And that object has properties like title, director, writer, producer, image, YouTube code, music. And those, they have values like Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Chris Columbus, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so that's what we're reading. Okay. So we're eventually going to get a JSON array. We're going to get the JSON. First, when we get the JSON, it's an object because we started with the curly bracket. But within that object, there's an array of Harry Potter movies. And so that's what this is for. That JSON array is for that array that we're going to get out of the file. The overall file is an object, but there's an array within it. And that's what this is for. That's what 69 is for. 68 is for our spinner. We're going to have we're going to make a simple array of just titles of movies. So it's going to be a simple string array, and it will be sort of a parallel array. We'll have an array of just movie titles, and then we'll have an array of more sophisticated JSON objects, and there will be 8 movie titles, and there will be 8 JSON objects, and the 0, 1 they'll correspond, so they'll be parallel. So that's what 68 and 69 are for. And again, what Volley does for us is handles the request and the response. And the first thing we're doing with Volley is saying that we're going to establish what's known as a request queue. So you can make multiple requests to the internet. So it is establishing a queue. That's what we're doing in 71. We're establishing a queue. Now I'm going to jump all the way down to the bottom. If you do not add your request to the queue, nothing happens. Everything else is to say, I'd like to have a request. This is what to do with my request. But here's the request. Here's the actual requesting. You add it to the queue. That does the actual requesting. That does the action. Everything else is sort of definition, and then this is sort of execute the definition. This is like a function. This is like calling the function. Nothing happens if you don't have this. It's one innocent little line, and nothing happens if you don't have it. So this is why I'm shouting at you. It's easy to forget, but nothing happens without it. Okay. Scroll back up. Here we are. So now we have to establish this request. Again, Volley handles the request and the response. So we are going to have it make a request, and then we're going to tell it what to do with the response when it receives it. Okay. We are specifically going to get a JSON file, and so our request is for a JSON object. One more time, look at the file. The file was a JSON file that starts with the curly bracket. We're requesting a JSON object. So that's what we're saying here. I want a JSON object. I want a JSON array. I don't want an image. I don't want text. You should understand that this is a JSON and it's an object. Volley is smart enough to know all these distinctions. Okay, so I'm expecting a JSON object. I let Volley know that. So I'm making a JSON object request. So there are a number of things you need to make a JSON object request. When you're making a request, an HTTP request, there are usually two standard methods, a get and a post. If you make a get, the bigger difference is if you're sending any data. So sometimes when you're working, say, with an API, you don't request everything. You request, you send up some information. So let's say I was working with the weather API. I don't want to know the weather, all the weather for the entire world. I want to know the weather for Philadelphia. I want to know, do I want to know a 1-day forecast or a 5-day forecast or a 10-day forecast? So I will send it, then I want Philadelphia. I will send it, and I better get the right Philadelphia, not Mississippi or whatever the hell, some other Philadelphia. So I have to send it Philadelphia, maybe I have to send it Pennsylvania, maybe I have to send it, then I want a 5-day forecast, because they may have all sorts of weather information that's too much. I need to specify what I want. So sometimes a request also is sending data to the server. If you do a get, then that data that you are sending is sort of open. It's not secured. But if you did a post request, then that data is more secure. So get is sort of easier, but less secure. But there are two methods you have to specify, and so there's the get. You have to say where you want to go. You're going to the URL that we wrote above. There's this parameter for the JSON request, which is null. Frankly, I don't know what that is, except you must have it, and the null works, so there. Okay. Now, what is this Volley doing for us? It's going to make the request, but it's also going to listen. When we read the local JSON file, we could expect it to happen right away. We could say, set up the stream and read it. But now we're going out to get a resource off the internet. This takes time. Internet resources take time, so you need a listener. This is like when we were doing stuff with where we wanted to respond to a user. We had to wait for the user to do something. Now we have to wait for the internet to do something. So I don't know, the internet is our user in this case, or something. We have to wait for the internet to respond. So we're going to listen for the response, which is going to be a JSON object. And then the response, so I'm setting up a function. There are two methods that we must override. Just like when you have a spinner, there are two methods you have to override. There's the on selected item and the on nothing selected. And there are the two things, and you must have them or it doesn't work. When you're using Volley, you have two methods, and one is for I got the thing. So I made a request and it's giving me the response I expect. Or it's giving me a response, at least as far as the computer is concerned, of what it expects. And then there's an error response. So this is the regular response. So we have to say, if there's a normal response, what do we want to do? So that's what we're doing now. If there's a norm, and the answer, and this is a function, you can see this fat arrow notation. So we're setting up a function, and the response is the argument. So it sends us the response, which is the JSON. We requested a JSON object. So this was a JSON object request. So we expect response to be a JSON object. Okay, so here's the response. What do I want to do with this response when I get it? The same thing I did after I read the file when we did the horse racing. So here's the response. I'm getting the JSON array called films. Let's look at the file one more time. Here's the file. It's an object. There's a property called films, which is an array. So that's what we're saying here. Get the array that happens to have the name films from the response, which was a JSON object. So now, and that was my JSON array. And I made room for that above. I said, I'm going to have a JSON array. Now I have it. I'm going to loop over the JSON array. I'm going to get the object of the array. I'm going to grab the title, and I'm going to add it to my films, which is a string list. And this is for my array adapter. Okay. So loop over the array, and I'm creating the parallel array, the simpler parallel array to load my spinner. That's what this is about. There are all sorts of ways in Kotlin for looping. This is sort of an old-fashioned loop that has an explicit counter. Have a counter I and start at 0 and go, when you say the word until, it's going to go up to, but not including the length. So if I have 8 movies, it's going to go from 0 to 7. I can't say like for movie in my JSON array. That would mean that my JSON array in the fancy language supports an iterator, but it doesn't publish, it doesn't expose an iterator. So I have to go sort of more old-fashioned, have an index and loop through the index. Okay, so then when I have the index, I can get the JSON object with that index, and then that object has a string property, which was the title, which I add to film titles. Now I have my parallel array for my array adapter. Here's my array adapter. The standard, array adapters by now. Here's the array I just made. And then here's me using it to populate the spinner. Now then I have things in my spinner. Then I ask what happens when they choose something from my spinner. I had somebody just this morning, didn't have the on nothing selected, and I think it underlines the object and goes all squiggly on the object. Because the object requires the object is of a class, and the superclass is saying you must override these two methods. And even if we never do anything here, at least I never do, but if you don't do anything, if you leave it blank, when it's telling you you must override it and you don't have it, it won't work. So, okay. So here is the on item selected, and it gives you 4 things, and I always work with the 2 middle ones. The view is the thing that you saw in the dropdown in the spinner, and the I is the index. So I just have some toast that says you chose Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. So you take the view, you cast it as a text view, it has a text, a string, whatever you saw is what's there. So that was the name of the movie. More important to us in this case is the I. We loaded the spinner with the film titles, but that was a parallel array to our JSON array. And so when we say they're a parallel array, they share indices. So the 0th thing in the spinner is the 0th thing in the JSON array, and they both correspond to Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. So now I can use in my JSON array, I can get the object at position I and get the director, writer, producer, music, and put them in the corresponding text view. I have an image, a get string image, and that is the name of the file. I have to add the base URL to that. Here's me adding the base URL to the file name. So one more time. So this just says, where's the image? Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone posters.jpg. It doesn't say http://w. So it's not a full, the image thing is not a full URL. It's just the name of the image file, and I have to add the base URL to it. Not all data files are like that. Some data files might give you the full URL. You've got to look at the data file and see what it gives you and adapt accordingly. So I'm adding the base URL. Here's the base URL. Here's the file name. And then I'm using Picasso. So Picasso get load and then into. This would be a little bit easier looking if I chose Coil. Coil has a little bit nicer notation than Picasso. Here's nothing in case as I just said, you have to have the on nothing selected or it doesn't work. Here's the button. If the button the spinner, I'm jumping too much around. The spinner gives you the index I. The button, I have to get the index. So here's me going to the spinner and getting the index. I called it ID. Then here's me getting the YouTube code, not the full YouTube URL. It's just the YouTube code. And so here we are again concatenating a base URL and a code to make a fuller URL. And then we're setting up this intent to jump over and show the movie clip on YouTube. The end of the on-click listener, here's the end of response. And then we said there were two methods in Volley, the response, the good response, the valid response, and then the error response. So I needed an error listener, the other thing I have to override. It has an error parameter that comes in, and all I've decided to do is toast out that error with a toString method, just to see what the error is. I've finally done defining my JSON object request. Now I am adding my request to the queue. Again, one more time. It won't happen if you don't put it on the queue. Now we're at the bottom. I'll show you what you have to do, which is almost exactly the same thing with different data. So you're going to use Volley. You're going to use a data file I have that's related to the Internet Movie Database. So here's the base URL for this project, IMDb. Here's specifically the JSON file, and here's an example of the images. You're going to use, just as this project did, you're going to use Volley to handle that request and response. And then this is JSON. I think it's pretty much the same form of JSON that I had. it is. It starts with a curly brackets, so it starts with an object that has a property, IMDb top, and that property is an array of objects. So it has the same structure, the same JSON structure, it's just different data. What else? So you're going to use Volley to get the JSON off the internet. So you're not getting my JSON and putting it in raw. You're using Volley to get it off the internet. Okay. Put the stuff in the spinner. I asked for the rank of the movie and the title. So I don't know, like number 1, Shawshank Redemption, number 2, The Godfather, whatever it is. And then put things in the spinner, show me images and so on when they choose something from the spinner, and the button that goes to the YouTube clip. If none of my movies work, it's probably you. If some of my movies don't work, that's probably me. Like people put things on YouTube and they didn't really have permissions and they have to take them down, or maybe they changed their settings and you can't code them. So it could be if 1 or 2 of the movies don't work. I didn't try. I had to fix the Harry Potter movies last night. I did not go through the IMDb movies to see if they do or don't work. So I think if none of them work, there's probably a problem that with you coding. But if some of them don't work, if some of them work and some of them don't, then that's probably me giving you codes that I should have updated. Any questions for the recording? Say no. Say no. Okay. I stopped.